On today's episode, Matt Roth places his story in the time capsule. You are now tuned in to the Story Time Capsule.
Well, my name is Matt Roth, and I'm happy to be with Stacy on the Story Time Capsule. I'm going to tell a story about a small thing that happened to me about 20 years ago. So around about 2000, 1999, 2000, 2001. I worked in a building south of downtown Los Angeles, near USC. And there was a woman who was a security guard / receptionist who greeted people when they came in and so forth. And she often worked after hours, and as did I. And so I would see her on the way out. Annabelle was her name. And, we would greet each other and talk to each other, courteous coworkers. And I guess because I, would leave late some nights and there was no one else around, maybe we had a little more conversation, but it was very comfortable. She was older than me. In fact, she retired while I worked there. So she was well into her 60s, African American. And one night, one day, when I was looking for a place to go to lunch, I asked her, if she was from the area. And so there was this barbecue place on Crenshaw that she said, she loved. And this guy that she grew up with in Monroe, Louisiana, decades earlier, before their families had made their way to Los Angeles. So she was childhood friends with this guy, Ross, who owned the restaurant. It was called Tasty Q's, corner of 39th and Crenshaw, pretty close to where I worked. So I went over there, and I don't remember if I went with a group the first time or if I was just by myself. But if I went with a group, it was probably 2 or 3 white people, including me. And there's a customer's a customer. But, the racial geography of Los Angeles is also a reality. And sometimes, there's are you here for the barbecue or something else? But I was able to say, Annabelle, who works over here, said, "Oh, Annabelle, yeah." So it was kind of nice and smooth. The food was amazing. And I went there probably 2 or 3 times over the course of a few months. It was always, "Hey, how you doing?" And that's the first place where I experienced the deep fried turkey. The turkey, the giant vat of oil is so good. Apparently a Louisiana specialty. And so there's one night, it was a Friday, and I was working late. Some deadline, something. And I called Patty, my wife. We live in Santa Monica, which is about a half an hour away, maybe at that time of night. It was, I don't know, not super late. I was going to be coming home like, 7:30, that kind of thing. It was Friday. We hadn't figured out supper yet. It was a bit of a surprise that I was going to be working late. So I called her up and I said, "Look, I'm going to be late, but let me stop at Tasty Q's, this barbecue place I've been telling you about on Crenshaw, which is on the way. And I'll get some barbecue, and we'll have barbecue." Great. So I do it. Now, when I went in previously at lunchtime, it was a different staff, except for Ross. It was always Ross and 2, 3, 4 women that were working there. Sometimes there was a guy in the back that was tending a smoker. But when you went to the counter, the public-facing staff. It was always women, various ages, always African American. And now I'm encountering the dinner staff for the first time instead of the lunchtime staff. And I could see Ross in the back, and hi, we wave. By the way, this Tasty Cues, it's not there anymore. Ross passed away, and it's in another use now. But it was a reuse of one of the original Taco Bell buildings, with the archways. And so it had this little tiny dining area with like 6 tables and this giant kitchen in the back. And Ross was in the back. And so the evening staff was a woman that I hadn't met before. And she was older, and she had really thick glasses. And as you will see, her compromised eyesight is critical to this story. So I don't call ahead. I just walk in because it's pretty quick. And wave to Ross. Can I help you? Yeah. Make my order. And she looks up at me and she says something like, so where are you staying? Something like that. Where do you stay? Where do you live? And I thought, that's an odd question. And in retrospect, the reason that the question even came up is because I was there after dark, not during lunch. White guy with a tie, or at least a shirt that could handle a tie. During the day, sure, someone that works nearby comes by for lunch, but lives far away in some white place, right? But after dark, getting some food to go, I think there was an assumption that you live nearby. And given the racial geography of Los Angeles, I think there was not an assumption, but there was an association in this woman's mind that if you live nearby, you're likely a person of color. And so I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe she's just being polite. But I said, no, I live in, you live nearby? Something like that. I said, we live in Santa Monica. Ah. And I can see Ross in the back, like looking up, like, what kind of conversation is this? Or just aware that it's more than, 3 orders of ribs kind of discussion. I said, yeah, we live in Santa Monica. And she says to me, so a lot of black folks out there? And now I'm thinking, this is where the story like ramifies in memory. This whole thing took 20 seconds or 30 seconds to happen. But the uncertainty that I had in the moment about what to say and how it was going to turn out is the part that stays with me. Because now she's a lot of black folks out there. And I thought, well, okay, that could mean that she's just interested in general about, the possibilities for life. I don't know. Maybe she's never been out there. She doesn't know if there's black people. I don't know. But there's also that lingering thing that is like, why is she asking me that? And now Ross is walking towards the counter, too. And I said, well, my kids go to the high school. And it's probably about 15% black. Maybe 40% Latino, the rest, white and Asian. And because I answered her question, okay? I was really, understand that I really deeply dug the fact that I knew the owner of this barbecue place and I could go there and feel comfortable and have a little wave. And also there's other customers who are from the neighborhood. They might not know who I am or what it is. But when they see Ross, give me the high sign, then it's like, okay, and so it can be a relaxed time for everybody. And I don't want to lose this because I really, I like the food. I feel like, I've had some conversations with Ross. I don't want, him to think I'm a dickhead. And I don't want to be a dickhead. And I think this woman might be laboring under a misconception, but I don't want to like correct her, like you're wrong. Because that's like, that's, I don't know, it's kind of like emotional violence, it's not good fellowship. And so I remember uncertainty and a little bit of fear. Not fear that I was in any kind of danger, but fear that this could end badly. And I remember my desire that everybody get out of this with dignity. I remember thinking that. And so she said, a lot of black folks out there. I said, well, my kids go to high school and it plays out like this. And she looks at me unseeingly, apparently, nods her head and says something like, so you can make it out there, kind of thing. Like it's a okay community for black people. At this point, it's very clear that she has made this misconception and her eyesight has failed to correct the misconception. The misconception is based on the fact that if you walk into a place at 39th and Crenshaw at 8 o'clock at night to get some barbecue, the likelihood is you're local and the likelihood is that you're a person of color. But it was just one of those times when that wasn't the case, okay? And so from that and the lack of eyesight to correct that, it just goes down this road. She says, oh, so you can make it out there. At this point, Ross is right next to her. And he grabs her by the arm and he turns her towards him and he says to her, he's not black. And she says, what do you mean? He's in here ordering barbecue 8 o'clock at night. And Ross says, listen, white people eat barbecue all times of day, okay? And, I don't want to say that she's shook, but, that whole thing of being corrected, none of us, like, love that feeling, right? And so she turns to me and she says, so what are you? And now I feel a little stuck because it's like, again, how to get out of this so that everyone's dignity is intact. And I, just am not an asshole. And why is this a problem? Because, race is such a fraught thing in our country. The structures, the institutions, the habits that have come. And, particularly when it's white people and black people encountering each other. And always, there's always, that question, are you one of those? I mean, I feel that it's a legitimate question of a white person, are you one of those? And I don't want to be one of those, I don't. But so she's asked, and it's like, and what am I going to say now? It's like, no, I'm not black. Perish the thought, because I don't want to like be negative about blackness. Nor do I want to claim something I don't deserve, right? I don't want to say, oh yeah, I'm a brother, I'm down, I'm a brother. No, that's if that was ever in me, I was well past it by then. And so I just fell back on the truth, which was, this is what I told her. She says, what are you? And I said, well, something like that. You got to rely on what your parents tell you. And, my parents never said anything about us being black. but we always ate a lot of barbecue. And she just nodded at me. And I looked at Ross, and he nodded at me. And I went and sat down. And a couple of minutes later, my order came out, and I paid my bill, and I, smiled and waved and went on my way, and felt very comfortable going back there. So simple little thing. Conversation takes 20 or 30 seconds. It's like buying some barbecue. So go through it in real time. So you from around here? No, I live in Santa Monica. Oh, a lot of black people out there? Well, my kids go to the high school, and, maybe 10, 11%, 15% black, and, mix of others. So you can make it out there okay. Ross, he's not black. Well, he's eating barbecue 8 o'clock at night. White people eat barbecue all times a day. So what are you? Well, my parents never said anything about us being black, but we always ate a lot of barbecue. End of conversation. What was that, 20 seconds? But every step of it felt so fraught and so, filled with possibility for misunderstanding or unintentional insult. And one of the reasons why it continues to resonate with me is because of, the context of our lives right now, and how central these issues remain, how many things that, someone of my age might be forgiven for assuming they were even a little bit settled, but they're not at all. And I just, want to have more moments like that. I don't think that empathy among people who look different is going to change institutional racism or these long, intentional, and entrenched structures. But if it can be so complicated to order barbecue, it really brings home to me, how much work we have to do to get at this thing. And that's my story.
To hear more of Matt's reflections on his story, you can check out the bonus content where we held a little Q&A. At Story Time Capsule, we want to hear everyone's story. This space is for you to tell your story in whatever way you choose, through conversation or creative writing, maybe even by sharing a recipe. If you would like to sign up to share your story on the podcast, you can visit our website at storytimecapsule.com or follow the link in our Instagram bio at StorytimeCapsulePodcast. Story Time Capsule bonus content. So, I have a couple of questions. First question is, why didn't you just say I'm white?
Because it felt, that's a good question, by the way. I guess it's the obvious one in some ways too. So to just say I'm white is to draw the boundary, is to reject a sense of connection, commonality. And it's a sharp boundary in our society. And the reason is because I didn't want to distance myself. I didn't want to just say, nope, you're wrong, I'm white. That would have felt a little blunt to me in the moment. Now, Ross, he had no compunction about saying it. But he's positioned differently from me, you know? He has the standing to do that. But, you know, for a white person, and also, you know, I just felt like it was a gift, a blessing to have even a tiny sense of belonging at a place like that. And I think I wanted to make sure that I could hold on to it by not distancing myself so harshly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good answer. Good answer. Okay, let me see what other.
Do I get an A?
Maybe.
Okay.
We'll see. I have to play it back.
All right.
So it felt like time slowed down.
In memory, it does. A little bit time slowed down because, and this is, you know, the nature and science of memory, because thoughts are, you know, fleeting electronic impulses, and you can have more than one at the same time. You know, you can have, you know, fear, confusion. Well, those aren't thoughts, those are more emotions, but you can have those along with the thought of, how do I answer that without building a sense of distance and rejection into it, you know, rejection of the question into it, you know. And so I think that the time slows down in memory. It feels like it slows down, I suppose, a little bit, but I don't want to go overboard with that. You know, I think it's more like, I'm hesitating a little bit to compare it to the discourse around like sports, professional sports at a high level. When someone, you know, reaches that position of mastery and experience, you know, where they really understand the game that they're playing and what all the possibilities are in a given moment, they often say the game slows down for me, right? And I can see the myriad options and choose among them. Time doesn't literally slow down, but we're able to, you know, kind of disaggregate the facets of experience and navigate among them. And in recounting it or remembering it, you know, as you know, kind of list out the different, you know, aspects of experience that you have disaggregated, you know, you can spend a good 15 minutes describing something that took 10 seconds. I think I just did that.
Here's something what I find really, really, really interesting is there's a couple of components of this. First of all, Black people are dealing with a conversation like that literally all the time, right? Why are you here? What's going on? But from a much more, what's interesting is if this woman, because of her eyesight, was assuming that you were Black, yet you still felt an element of, like the element of unease, of fear, of whatever it was in that moment, although she was addressing you as a peer, really.
Yes.
Right? And that's an interest. I don't even know what I want to say about that, but it's a very interesting thing because she was speaking to you as a peer and you were receiving it as, I don't know what the word would be, but
in racial terms, not a peer.
Right. And
Right.
it's very interesting to think about it that way.
Well, I think I can illuminate a little bit, you know, what it felt like. I wasn't rejecting her as a peer. In fact, the only reason it's worth telling this story is I'm celebrating her as a fellow human, you know, and what we have in common. The fear wasn't of the other. The fear was that if I put myself in a position of correcting her, that is a position of power. No, I'm right and you're wrong. Even if it's to correct a simple error like that, okay? But again, I say in race, there's no such thing as simple errors. in this country in these encounters. And so my fear was that, I mean, it's like I said earlier, when you said, why didn't you just say you're white? Because that's building a wall immediately. It's like, boom, I got nothing to do with you. Or could be perceived as that. It's just sharp and blunt. And so the fact that she's accepting me as a peer in error, for me, what that feels like is, ooh, I don't want to get credit for something I don't deserve. I don't want to, get caught in a lie. It's like Ross knows me. It's not like, it's going to go very far. But I don't want to be in a position of saying you're wrong and I'm right. Mm-hmm. I love you for saying this. I wish I knew her name. It's like, wow, how welcoming, But on a misconception. So I'm not rejecting the fellowship, the assumption of being a peer. I'm just saying we can have this fellowship, without that, surface thing. And that's my answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love this story because it is, it's really provocative. I mean, it really does give you a lot to think about. And I don't know how I think about it yet. I can see why this is a moment that like has stuck with you and that you've thought about a lot, because it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. And so you never saw this woman again?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And did you laugh about it ever, or was there conversation?
We smiled.
Yeah.
We smiled. Now, I have a much deeper history with Tasty Cues because, which I guess makes this, a happy ending, really, to my story. Because, remember, my fear, if that's not too strong a word, my concern while the Friday night barbecue order was happening was that I want to be able to come back here.
Right.
I like this place. I want this in my life. And that turned, and that intention was fulfilled, because around about that time I was completing coursework for my PhD, and I would take these long lunches to get reading done, and I needed to be near work in case something came up. I mean, they were super nice to me. I wasn't sneaking around, but I had to be available in case something came up. And honestly, like in the afternoon, the place was really quiet. I mean, it's hopping at lunch, it's hopping at dinner. Well, on the weekends, it's hopping at dinner. But there's some nice, quiet, long hours in the afternoon when nobody walks in the place, and they're just, prepping all the food for the night. And Ross would let me hang around. I'd get a sandwich or something. I could sit in the booth for 2 hours. He'd never say boo to me. So I did that. Although it's funny, I was doing my degree in U.S. urban history, and there's and I did a component of African American history within that. And so there's a lot of reading to get under your belt. And there's a book about these racial violence that occurred in Chicago in 1919. One of the very large conflicts that occurred around that time. That's when the Tulsa Massacre was, 2 years later, 1921. But it's all to do with inflation, anxiety in the post-World War I period, and a lot of things that came out of that, the Red Squads and the white on black racial violence. Anyway, so there's this book about what happened in Chicago in 1919, and it's called Race War. And I had a paperback of it, and I'm reading it in Tasty Cues, and the cover, I just had lost awareness of this for a moment. The cover was it was black with like crimson letters, so it was, you know, kind of a flag, and it had the title on it, Race War. And I'm sitting there reading it, taking notes, and how is this different from Newark in 1968? How is this different from Los Angeles in 1992? You know, and Ross comes up to me. He says, "Matt, what the hell are you doing?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're like holding up a poster that says race war. You know, you're the only white guy within, like, you know, 100 yards of here. What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Oh." And I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, you know. And I kind of tried to cover it up, and then he just kind of acted like a third grade teacher, and he said, "Did anyone ever tell you about book covers?" So, anyway, and the daytime staff, they knew me really well because of stuff like that. And Deborah, who was the main order taker during lunchtime, maybe a little bit of racial stereotyping, but she got it in her mind that I look like Bill Clinton. And every time I walk in that place, she says, "Mr. President."
I can see it.
Well, let me tell you something. When I take my friends, you know, and after I became really familiar with this place, I would go evening hours. And I remember, I mean, there was several times when I would take friends there. And, I mean, you grew up in Los Angeles, and you know the discourse around the racial geography. I mean, there's a lot of white people that just will not go south of the 10, right? And let me say that this is south of the 10. And, but, you know, to walk in and have, you know, this large, effusive woman say, "Mr. President, you know, we got your table right here." I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." I was very gratified to be welcomed, and you know, I think it was, you know, just a tiny little extra, you know, sense of belonging. It wasn't like, "Hey, this is my place," you know. It wasn't like, you know, Frank Sinatra in the back room or anything like that. But it was a place I could hang out, and they knew me, and the food was always really, really good. And maybe, you know, because I didn't put my foot in my mouth on that, you know, fraught evening, the first time I was there after dark ordering barbecue, I mean, that never would have happened if I had, you know, blown it. I would have had to find another barbecue place.
It's a really good story.